Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. Christopher McQuarrie just revealed the Superman Man of Steel movie that he pitched with Henry Cavill just a little while ago, right before James Gunn was hired and rebooted the DC universe with David Corenswet's Superman, which we're about to watch in a couple months. They're being real dudes about it, like they don't put James Gunn or David Corenswet on blast or anything like that because they are about to release that movie. But I'll explain how Christopher McQuarrie's version of Man of Steel 2 is different from Zack Snyder's version in what he had planned for the character going forward. And then the later conversations that people were having about Man of Steel 2 when Henry Cavill was still coming back, like we're talking Black Adam post-credit scene, where his version of Superman returned on screen and they had a completely different 10-year plan for the DC movies before James Gunn was hired and decided to reboot everything. It's pretty wild. It seems like every year or two you hear more news about Henry Cavill's Superman and what was going to happen with the character at different points with different directors, different creatives on the project. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. They're calling this summer the summer of Superman because they're rolling so hard on the character, and it's obviously up against the Fantastic Four movie and the Jurassic World movie. But if you don't know who Christopher McQuarrie is, he's most recently associated with the Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movies, going back to Mission Impossible Rogue Nation in 2015. He'd worked with Tom Cruise in Edge of Tomorrow in 2014, the year before. Then Tom Cruise liked working with him so much, so he basically brought him on to do all of his Mission Impossible movies since Rogue Nation. Where he starts working with Henry Cavill was during Mission Impossible Fallout, which was around the big Justice League debacle. Everybody remembers Justice League Mustache Gate with Henry Cavill's mustache. It was one in a series of disasters that happened with Zack Snyder's Justice League. First, Zack Snyder had to leave the project because of what happened with his family, his daughter. Joss Whedon came on. We all saw what happened with that. Complete disaster there just by itself. Then there were all the Henry Cavill mustache problems during the Justice League cut. What had happened is that during that period when he was working on the Justice League movie, he was also working on Mission Impossible Fallout. He was the villain during that film, and he had a mustache very prominently during the film. Originally, Warner Brothers DC, Zack Snyder's plans for his Superman during Justice League were totally fine, worked out totally with all of his Mission Impossible movie plans for filming.
Green Lantern was what had come to me.
But because of all the production problems with Justice League and the later many reshoots that were ordered on that movie, he actually had to come back on after he'd already grown his mustache. So Christopher McQuarrie was actually a total dude during that period, and it actually arranged with the Warner Brothers DC people for Henry Cavill to be able to shave his mustache and film all of his Superman scenes again for the reshoots that he needed. But a Paramount person, like a Paramount executive, was basically the bad guy in all this, put the kibosh on all that, leading to the actual mustache gate of it all, where he had to keep his mustache during the Superman reshoots, and you get to all that really horrifying CG of his character during the Justice League cut. Which is why when you watch the Justice League Snyder cut, like Zack Snyder came back on and finished his Snyder cut, we saw it on HBO Max during the pandemic, you notice his face looks totally fine, no weird CG mustache situation at all, because all the footage that Zack Snyder had filmed was from before he left the project, so there were no mustache problems that had even come up yet. Then everything with the Justice League goes down absolutely horribly. Years go by, Henry Cavill releases Mission Impossible Fallout in theaters, goes to CinemaCon with Christopher McQuarrie in the cast of that movie. Then because Zack Snyder had left the studio, this is in 2019, mind you, like a little while after this had all gone down, so Zack Snyder was still freshly gone from the studio off doing other things. This was long before Warner Brothers DC were thinking about bringing him back to do the Justice League Snyder cut. But at least at the time, Henry Cavill was still technically their Superman. So people have started asking, what is going to be the next Superman movie? What is going to be Man of Steel 2? What are they going to do with the Justice League characters? There'd been no talk of recastings or rebooting or anything like that at this point. At CinemaCon 2019, people start literally asking Christopher McQuarrie what his Man of Steel 2 pitch is because he just worked with Henry Cavill, and there was a lot of talk behind the scenes about him actually talking to DC about doing some DC movies. While he was there, he joked about not revealing all of his secrets because he had still been in the middle of actually talking to them, so deals were happening behind the scenes.
That, for me, solved the whole Green Lantern problem. The costume is another thing. And also, how do you do it with Superman?
In present day 2025, as of me posting this video, Christopher McQuarrie now is saying that what was actually going on is that he was really actually pitching a Green Lantern Hal Jordan reboot movie. Superman Henry Cavill was going to be a big part of that, and then after his Green Lantern reboot movie, he would do a Man of Steel 2 movie. This is what he means when he says he cracked Hal Jordan Green Lantern's story, the character in general. Henry Cavill's Superman was going to be a big part of that new Green Lantern reboot movie. Then he would do Man of Steel 2 and go on to do more DC Superman movies. So remember, these movies that he's talking about are the ones that he was pitching back around 2019, pre-pandemic, pre-Justice League Snyder Cut, pre-James Gunn reboot. All of his plans for Man of Steel 2 are different from what Zack Snyder planned for the rest of Henry Cavill's Superman story. The next part of his story was basically going to be Justice League 2, Justice League 3. I've already done a full breakdown of those different movies because those are much, much bigger than just standard Man of Steel 2 sequel movies. There'll be a link to that video down in the description below. But essentially, during the Justice League Snyder Cut, you were going to see, as you saw part 1, we all saw it on HBO Max a couple of years ago. What was going to happen after that is it was slowly going to be the redemption of Superman. There was a lot of time travel involved during Zack Snyder's Justice League trilogy, but eventually, after they'd finished the complete redemption of Superman by the end of the third Justice League movie, then they were going to do Man of Steel 2, and it was going to be set closer to actual present day. This is where you start to hear competing ideas for what Man of Steel 2 was going to be, because there were a couple different versions of the movie that we actually heard about, like versions with Brainiac showing up. Henry Cavill himself talked about different versions of the movie that he actually pitched to Warner Brothers and DC for the future of his character. It sounds like that's the more recent version that we actually saw when Henry Cavill announced that he was going to be in the Black Adam movie, like about a week after that movie came out and he debuted in the post-credit scene. He posted that video basically saying that more was on the way, like they had 10 years worth of DC movie plans, Justice League plans that were going to pay off. That was the Crisis on Infinite Earths in the movies that they were eventually building up to right before James Gunn was hired. Then like literally a week after he posted that Instagram video, Warner Brothers DC David Zaslav announced that they'd hired James Gunn to come on, and James Gunn had decided to just completely reboot everything.
The first 5 minutes of my Superman movie,
basically rendering Henry Cavill's announcement that he was coming back completely inert. So the whole idea is that Henry Cavill had essentially worked out a deal to come back for like this future 10 years plan with a previous administration at DC before all those people got fired or left the company. So when people talk about Henry Cavill being done dirty by the studio, being jerked around, it gets into a lot of the history of Superman since 2017 when Justice League came out and things just went into complete chaos with what they were doing with the character. To his credit, the way that Henry Cavill has talked about James Gunn and speaking with him about his plans to reboot everything, basically reboot all the Justice League actors specifically, all of his plans for like the next 10 years of his DC movies with David Corenswet's Superman, this brand new version of the Justice League. It sounds like Henry Cavill is expecting that at some point he might come back in a different capacity, but I'm not expecting them to roll really hard on multiverse tropes in the next 10 years. I think that even Marvel, for instance, is trying to move past the whole multiverse of it all. So if Henry Cavill does come back in the DC movies at some point, it'd be as a different character, like a Jor-El, for example. When everybody started seeing the David Corenswet Superman trailers, everybody started wondering if that evil Superman clone of Lex's inside that black suit, that black noir-looking character, making all the boys' references as possible, that they're calling Ultraman, was actually Henry Cavill under the suit. Even though as of me posting this video right now, notice the date that I posted this video specifically, I have not seen the movie as of this date. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it's not Henry Cavill underneath that suit. It's just another version of David Corenswet when he rips the mask off at some point in the movie, and it'll just be a clone of him. And at least for right now, Henry Cavill has moved on to other, better projects of his own that he has a much bigger hand in authoring. Most people right now are pointing towards his Warhammer series and his Warhammer movies that he's developing at Amazon. It's still pretty early days on that, which is why we don't have a ton of footage or a bunch of news about exactly who he's playing. He's been very coy about who he might play just because he is such a Warhammer stan. Like, he's been a lifelong Warhammer fan, way more than he's been a lifelong fan of, say, like Superman and the DC movies. He's going to be in that new live-action Voltron movie. They haven't revealed who he's playing during that, but he's also going to be in the new Highlander reboot movie too. So like there's a bunch of big movies that he's actually working on right now.
And still something that I'm very keen to flesh out. And so what lessons has he learned? And so we get those steps towards building that incredible, wise version of Superman rather than the, still wet behind the ears kind.
Everybody let me know in the comments, though, what do you think about Christopher McQuarrie's version of a Henry Cavill Superman Man of Steel 2 movie and his Green Lantern movie plans that he had? Now, I don't think that we're going to bring him on to just completely reboot all the Justice League movies. Usually when they bring on directors for pitches like that, I think if things go really, really well, then maybe at some point, like if they continued with that universe, the DCEU, then maybe he would have had a crack at the next Justice League movies. But you have to remember that all of his plans for the characters were completely different from Zack Snyder's specific plans. So usually when people talk about more DC movies, more Superman, Man of Steel 2, they're mostly thinking of Zack Snyder's plans for the character. If you really want to look at the bad dudes in all this, like who do we blame for all the bad vibes? Just blame all the Warner Brothers suits and the executives behind the scenes that were pulling the strings during the Henry Cavill Superman era. 99.9% of the time, it's usually some really, really bad executive who's behind all the really terrible things that wind up happening in big movie universes like this. That and lawyers, you can generally blame lawyers for ruining most fun in most situations ever. But as I said, there's going to be a bunch more Superman trailers coming with David Corenswet. Mexico CCXP Comic-Con is happening in a couple days. Both DC and Marvel are supposed to go. We're supposed to get Netflix's To Doom this weekend. So it sounds like there's going to be a bunch of trailers for a bunch of different things. I'll try to do videos for whatever does wind up getting released. Everybody click here for all my brand new Superman videos, and click here to learn about Zack Snyder's full plans, full plot for Justice League 2 and Justice League 3, because it is absolutely wild. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.